In 1803, the East India Company had a larger standing army than the British Crown. It was not a government. It had no parliament, no elected officials, no constitutional mandate. It was a company. It had shareholders. It paid dividends, and it governed 200 million people. Nobody had planned this. It had happened, one contract at a time. On the 31st of December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter to a group of London merchants. Their purpose was pepper, nutmeg, and cloves. The spice routes to Asia were controlled by the Portuguese and Dutch. The English wanted a share. The charter gave them the right to trade. It also gave them something nobody thought they would ever use: the right to make war, buried in the legal language. The merchants who signed it were thinking about nutmeg. Nobody thought the war clause would matter. For its first 100 years, the company was exactly what it looked like: a merchant sitting in a warehouse in Calcutta, negotiating spice prices with a Mughal official, paying the taxes he was asked to pay. Profitable, occasionally violent, contained. The war clause sat unused in a drawer in London. Then the Mughal Empire began to collapse. The central authority that had kept India politically stable for 150 years started fracturing into competing regional powers. For a trading company with an army clause in its charter, a fractured political landscape was an opportunity it had never anticipated and could not resist. On the 23rd of June, 1757, Robert Clive led approximately 3,000 company soldiers and Indian allies against the army of Siraj-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Bengal. The Nawab had 50,000 soldiers, cannons, and the support of French advisors. By any military calculation, the company should have lost. They won because Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own military commander, had already agreed to stand his troops down. In exchange, the company had promised him the position of Nawab after the battle. The fighting lasted less than a day. The outcome had been decided weeks earlier in a series of letters and a contract. They had not conquered Bengal. They had purchased it. With a bribe and a battle, they should have lost. Bengal was not just a territory. It was the wealthiest province in India. Its cotton textiles were sold across Asia and Europe. Its silk rivaled Chinese production. Its agricultural surplus fed the subcontinent. Controlling Bengal gave the company something it had never had: revenue. Not trading profit, tax revenue. The income of a state. Within a decade of Plassey, the company's annual revenue from Bengal alone exceeded the entire income of the British Crown. It used that revenue to fund more soldiers, more bribes, more contracts with more fractured regional powers. The pattern established at Plassey, divide, bribe, contract, absorb, repeated itself across the subcontinent. By 1800, the company controlled more territory than any European state. It had done it without ever being elected, without ever being declared a government, and without ever changing the word company in its name. What the company had built was a machine. Indian tax collectors collected taxes from Indian farmers. That money bought Indian textiles, spices, and opium at controlled prices. Those goods were sold in European markets at full price. The profit crossed the ocean to London. The tax burden stayed exactly where it was. Local rulers who resisted were offered a choice: a company subsidiary alliance, a treaty that gave them nominal independence in exchange for hosting company troops at their own expense, or face those troops in the field. Most chose the treaty. The treaty was a debt instrument disguised as a diplomatic agreement. The debt was never designed to be repaid. In 1770, Bengal experienced a catastrophic famine. Between 6 and 10 million people died, roughly a third of Bengal's population. The causes were multiple: drought, disruption to traditional grain distribution networks, and the company's insistence on continuing to collect land taxes in full even as the harvest failed. In London, the company's shareholders received their dividend that year. The famine was recorded in the company's administrative reports as a significant disruption to revenue collection. Not a human catastrophe, a revenue disruption. 16. In 1857, the soldiers the company had trained, armed, and paid for a century turned against it. The uprising spread across northern India faster than the company could respond. For a moment, a genuine moment, it looked like 200 million people might take back what had been taken from them, one contract at a time. The British Crown sent its own military to suppress the rebellion. It took 14 months and significant casualties on both sides. When it was over, the British government faced a question it could no longer avoid. Could a private company be trusted to govern 200 million people? In 1858, the British Crown dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control of India. The company's territories became Crown territories. Its army became the Crown's army. Its debts became the Crown's debts, which India was required to repay. The Crown didn't end the company because what it had done was wrong. It ended it because a private company governing a subcontinent had become structurally unstable. A corporation that size, with that much power and that little accountability, was a risk to the empire itself. The solution was not justice, it was absorption. The East India Company was not an exception. It was a demonstration. Private power without accountability expands until it encounters a force that can stop it. And that force is almost always a state that decides the expansion has become inconvenient. The company was not ended because it failed. It was ended because it succeeded too completely. It started with pepper and nutmeg. It ended with an army larger than most nations. Nobody planned it. Nobody voted for it. Nobody stopped it until it became inconvenient for the people who benefited from it. The question is not whether a company could accumulate that kind of power again. The question is, how would you know if it already had?